Hey guys, I'm Matt Hernandez, and today I'm going to show you the difference between taking a headshot with LEDs and strobes. Okay, so we are in the studio. I've got a friend coming in that's a client, needs a headshot. So we're just going to do a basic setup with clamshell lighting in front of my white wall here. And we've got, let's see, how many steps is this? I'm very technical here, as you can tell. 1, 2, 3. So I'm about 5 steps from the wall, and the light that's on the background is about halfway in between. We've got it pointed up to light it to make it white. And then in front, we have a big 3x4 softbox, a Westcott rapid box, and then below we're gonna have a 1x3 for fill. So we could just do this light by itself, but you're gonna get a little bit of darker shadow underneath, and because it's a headshot, you probably want it to be a little bit brighter and as flattering as possible. So we're gonna put this one underneath, turn it down a little bit so it will fill in those shadows. But clamshell lighting is generally gonna look good on anybody. You don't really have to figure out which side is their best. Now, you do need to probably turn them, obviously, one way or the other, so you're gonna have to figure it out for that. But as far as like positioning the light on one side, then it's not as big of a deal when it's in the middle like that, because it's gonna light on the same either way. So you still need to find out which one their good side is, but as far as like where the light's positioned for Rembrandt lighting, if we were using that type of setup, that would be a little bit more complicated. So I like to use this because it will work on anybody, and it's good beauty lighting. So we've got a nice big light source up top, and we're gonna put 2 strobes on here to start with. Well, actually 3, because we're gonna have one on the ground too. And the strobes are gonna be different from LEDs as far as the way that you use them, because they're gonna fire once, they're gonna pop with a flashlight and then go off. So you're gonna have the light on, obviously, or the modeling light, which will run the battery down. You can use that. They actually don't take as much power as they used to, especially with the FJ400s, which is what I'm using today. So that's not a bad option. If you don't want any of the ambient light to contaminate the picture, then you can turn the lights out and do that. I usually leave the light on in here because it doesn't really make that big of a difference. We're gonna have these turned up to about 7, around that, 7.5 maybe. The lower light's gonna be about a stop, maybe a half stop lower, so that you don't want the lighting to be completely even, because if you do that, then there won't be any shadows, and it'll be a little bit too bright underneath on the neck. So you want it to be a little bit less power. So we'll have to wait and see what we expose it for, but it's probably gonna be around a half a stop to a full stop lower. And then the background, you want just white, but not too white. If you blow it out too much, then you'll probably get some flare off the wall, and it can wrap around their face, which that can be a cool look. It can actually act like edge lights. But it can also, you lose contrast and you lose color when you have too much flare. So you've got to watch that too. There's different ways to light the background, but with one person, one light is generally enough. So we're just going to put the 7-inch reflector that comes on the light. We're going to have it on the ground, angled up about 45 degrees. So, okay. All right, let's show them the difference between the strobe and the LED real quick. So we've got a FJ400 first. It's 400 watt seconds. Like I said, you're not gonna have to turn it up to full power. You can turn it lower and then have your depth of field more shallow. I'm shooting with the Sony a7R5 and the 70-200. I generally like to shoot with this lens because this compresses the shot more, which is more flattering for headshots. When you shoot wider, I have a 24-72 that you can use that for portraits, but you have to be careful how wide you shoot it. If you don't shoot it at 70 millimeters, it can start to make people's nose look bigger the closer you get to them and distort their face a little bit. And you don't really realize it until you compare it to a compressed focal length like we're gonna use here. Even if you shoot this at 70, it's still gonna look pretty good. And shooting it more compressed, obviously, that's gonna give you more bokeh, but there's nothing in the background, so that's not really gonna make that big of a difference. Okay, so these are really handy outside because they have more power. Inside, it's not gonna be as big of a deal. So I get asked a lot, what's the difference? Can you use LED lighting instead of strobes? And in this situation, you absolutely can. There is at least one drawback, so make sure you stick around to the end, and I'll show you. I'm gonna take the same headshots for Tony with both the strobe and the LED so we can compare them, and we'll do that at the end so you can see which one you think you like better. But for outside, this is probably gonna be the choice because you wanna have more power than the ambient light. So if it's during the day, especially if it's sunny, then you're kind of out of luck with LEDs. They're not gonna be bright enough. And so that brings me to the main point about them, is that they're gonna be, so this is the LED. This is the 120B from Westcott. So that's the thing about LEDs, is they are always on. They're constant lights. So it's gonna look similar, but the lighting pattern will be the same, but they're not going to be as bright. So more than likely, we're going to have to raise our ISO and we're going to have to lower our shutter speed, which means there's going to be a greater chance of camera shake. Now, I'm not going to be on a tripod today because I actually couldn't find my tripod. We're not sure where we put it. I think I maybe left it at one of the schools that I was doing basketball pictures for. But generally, I would be on a tripod for headshots because if you do have to lower the shutter speed, especially if you have a white background that's going to open up, the shutter speed controls the ambient light, right? So that's going to make it a little bit easier to make the background white if you lower the shutter speed. I'm pretty confident that I can hold the camera steady because I've been doing this for so long. You've got to be careful with that. You can't move around really at all. I'm going to be probably around 1/100th, maybe less. And if you're less, then you really have to watch it. Now, a strobe, when it fires, that's going to freeze what's going on for the most part, unless it's moving fast. But if you're just holding the camera, unless you're moving it around crazy, if you're holding it pretty still, then the strobe's going to freeze what you're doing for the most part. LEDs is going to be much harder because it's not popping like that. It's not freezing the action. It's on constantly the whole time. So you really have to make sure you stay steady, or like I said, the best case scenario is to use a tripod. So, okay, so we're going to use the exact same lights, like I said, or the exact same lighting pattern, and just change these out and see what the difference is. We're going to try to have as close to the same settings as we possibly can and see what we get. Okay, so we actually filmed the outro for this video, and I realized that I didn't mention a couple of things, and I wanted to show you the pictures on the computer, so we decided to film it again at the desk. So here we are. So we lit the wall with an L60B, which is half as powerful as the 120. It wasn't quite bright enough to make it white. So what happened was the wall with the LED headshots was a little bit yellow, and the light was falling off because we had it on the ground, so it's creating fall off on the edges like a vignette. In hindsight, I should have cooled down the color temperature, number one, because that's adjustable on those lights. But also, we needed more power, so we put 2 Nanlite Pavo tubes, one on each side, and just turned them up all the way and aimed them at the wall, as you can see in the video. So those are added also, and those are the Pavo Tube 2 30XRs, if you guys want to check those out, and we'll link those too. And we'll also link the Westcott lights, the strobe, the FJ400s, and the L120 and the L60Bs also. So you guys can take a look at those and the modifiers we used on them. So in hindsight, like I said, I would have cooled the color temperature down on the wall because I had the ability to do that, and then left her probably how it was. And then if we'd had one of those lights back there, then we wouldn't have had to do anything extra in post. Unfortunately, we didn't. The Pavo tubes did get it closer. It's still not 100% white. So I'm still gonna have to do some editing here. So you can see, now these were popping up. We were actually tethering to Capture One. So they were popping up as we were shooting them. I love the tether to the iPad because the client can see what you're doing that way. That does put a little bit of pressure on you, but you also know if they like it or not. So that's very, very important. You don't want to be shooting stuff they don't like. So she was looking at it the whole time, and she actually liked the LEDs better. And I actually, in the original outro we filmed, said I liked them better too. They looked, I think it was because they were warmer. Now, that's another mistake that I made looking back. I should have paid a little bit more close attention to the color temperature and the white balance. So we did a custom white balance for the strobes, which I do all the time with a color checker, and I just sampled the white card and in the custom white balance menu of the camera, and it set it for me. That tends to be a little bit cool for headshots for my taste, so I could have warmed it up a little bit. But then whenever we did the LED headshots, we just set the color temperature to 4700, which is daylight balanced, and they did turn out warmer. So because the custom white balance was cooler, they don't really match, and the LEDs look better because of that. So that's why I liked them out of camera initially better, and so did she. So what I did was I brought them into Capture One, and I wanted to show you what happened when I processed them, the difference there was, because once I processed them, there really wasn't as big of a difference as I thought originally. So let's take a look and see what we got here. Okay, so these are raw and there's nothing done to them. So here's the strobe straight out of camera, and then here is the LED. So you can see how much warmer she is and the background. So when you just look at it like that, the skin tones, that may be a little bit warm, but it's a little bit more pleasing because most people don't want to look pale, obviously. So, okay, let's take off my filter here so you can see once I process them what the difference is. So there's the original, and then we were at, so these were at 1/100th, f8, ISO 200, and then the LEDs was at 1/80th, f8, ISO 1600, so quite a bit higher on the ISO. And I tried to pick two that were relatively similar. And so like I said, I wasn't on a tripod. So there are a few that are soft because I was hand holding at 1/80th. That's kind of hard to do. Most of them are sharp, but it's better to shoot on a tripod just to avoid that altogether. So the original one, there's the headshot with the strobe, and then I warmed it up. So you can see my Kelvin is 5626 to start, and I went up to 6374, and then I was negative 2.6 on the tint, and I went to negative 0.1, and I kind of eyeballed it just to get the skin tones to look what I thought looked natural. The starting point with the LEDs was 5626, negative 2.6, and then, so what I did, I selected the background, and I raised it, created a mask and raised it 1.62 stops and desaturated it. So if I turn that layer off, you can see there's before and after. So again, ideally you want to shoot that, correctly in camera, but in this case we weren't able to. But for the future, if I ever try that, I'm going to try to make sure that I'd probably get a third 120 just to make sure that we have enough power to light the background enough. Okay, so we created that background layer. If we turn that off, we can look at, there's the original. And then, so here it is. So we cooled it down. It was a little bit too warm. We changed it to 4795 on the Kelvin and negative 0.3. So you can see how we changed that there, just to get it a little bit cooler and a little bit more to the magenta side. So if we look at both of these in comparison, so if we do, so there's to start, big difference. And here's what we ended up with. I need to turn that layer back on, the background layer. There we go. So there's what we ended up once I changed the coloring, and that's pretty darn close. The blues look a little bit different, really, other than that. And the thing here is the ISO, because 1600 seems like it would be relatively high, right? Well, if we zoom in to, let's go to 100%. This is the one with 1600, and there is not any visible noise at all, which is pretty remarkable. That's, honestly, cameras are amazing today. That's great. And obviously there's not gonna be any noise here because they're at ISO 200. So, as far as that goes, the noise isn't gonna affect it that much. The lighting pattern is with the same modifiers in the same position. There's not a whole lot of difference. So if you have LEDs that are powerful enough to pull this off. Now, if you have less powerful LEDs, I don't know, it would be harder to, because if they're lower in power, that means your settings are gonna have to be lower. You're gonna have to shoot more wide open, possibly raise the ISO. If you raise it to 3200, then you're probably gonna see a little bit of noise. But then, if you have a less powerful LED also, then more ambient light's gonna seep in. And you're gonna have to control that more. So then you would really need the lights off probably, because you don't want any contamination. So the more powerful your lights, the more you're going to be able to stop down the camera, like, because we were at f8 here, so that was canceling out a lot of the ambient light coming in. So it worked out well. So I would highly recommend the LED scenario if that's what you already have. If you do some video work and you have those kind of lights, then it obviously definitely works. You can see from looking at these. So let's look at while we're here, I'm just going to show you a couple more from the shoot, just so you guys can see what we got, because we shot the rest of it with LEDs. She liked the way it looked. I thought it looked better, even though it turned out it wasn't as different as we thought, but we kept going with it. So this is lit the same way, just one, three backlights, and then the main light with the big softbox and a fill with the strip. We put the strip on the side now and had the softbox camera right. This is for her cleaning business, in case you couldn't tell. That's why she has the cleaning bottle and obviously the vacuum there. So, and just pulled the couch in, the rug from the viewing area. Then we had some with, I'll Photoshop my logo off the computer there. But several different outfits. And you can do a lot with a solid background like this if you got a few props. So yeah, so they turned out great. I was really surprised. I didn't expect to do the rest of the shoot with the LEDs, but they turned out great. So good to know that it works. And now I know how to answer people when they ask me that, because I get asked that pretty frequently. Okay, so that wraps it up for LEDs versus strobes inside for a headshot. Let us know in the comments below if you would be interested in seeing another video like this outside. I have a feeling that's going to be a lot different because outside's not as controllable, but I'd love to make a video on it if enough of you want to see it. So if you did get something out of this one though, we'd appreciate a like and a subscribe. Make sure you hit the bell so you get notified when we post new content. And also make sure to head over to Matthernandez.shop, sign up for the newsletter. That way you get notified on everything from new videos to templates and workshop announcements. We'll see you next time.